WNST, Towson, the Ravens Inc., Jeremy Macklin, and of course, Luke Jones will be out at mini camp all week long in Owings Mills. If there's any breaking news, you'll get it first on our WNST text service. That, of course, brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Meanwhile, the Orioles have moved their mess from the Bronx out to the south side of Chicago, Illinois. I now have on the line the pride of Peoria, Illinois, and longtime sports columnist and our old buddy from the Chicago Sun-Times. Rick Tellender joins us here from Chicago, where the Cubs own the town and the White Sox are trying to figure it out. But nonetheless, the Orioles have 4 games on the south side. Boy, the White Sox are in full rebuild mode here, right, Rick?
Yes, they are, because they better be with the record they have there. They now have the worst record in the American League. So, you know, when they unloaded Chris Sale, I mean, that was it. That said it. Obviously, people said, well, you know, he had some problems here, but look, you get a guy like that once every generation, a crazy left-handed guy who can throw 98, 99 miles an hour. So they let him go to the Red Sox, and that pretty much said it. We are rebuilding and come back in 2 or 3 years, and we'll see if we're any good.
Well, and that's an unusual thing, right? I mean, because they were still very much in we're trying to win when they're making deals with the Padres in the middle of the season, right?
Yeah. You know, baseball's a funny game like that. You make a couple big trades, and you hold your breath, and you hope that everybody does what they can do, and you hope they all do it together. That's what's really important. When a team wins a World Series, you quite often find that many of the members of that team had their best years, or close to their best years. And it certainly was that way with the Cubs. Kyle Schwarber last year, they had Dexter Fowler. All these people just, Chris Bryant, Rizzo, they were just great. And with the White Sox, you know, a lot was expected of Todd Frazier. I don't mean to lay it all on him, but they got him kind of as this big acquisition. And, he was going to hit a lot of home runs, and they hoped he would hit for some kind of average. He's doing a little better now. I think he went 3 for 4 last night, but, you know, he's batting around 220, and it's kind of like all or nothing with him. So, you know, that didn't work out, just like Adam Dunn didn't really work out before, the big slugger the Sox brought in. When those guys don't work out the way you think they're going to, it really sets everything back. Certain pitchers, Quintana, have not been, quite frankly, what they thought what the scouts and the White Sox thought they could become. So in that case, you got to kind of back up, say, what do we do now? Unload people with big contracts, hope that you acquire young players that develop, and hope that you get a core group around them. You know, everybody looks to the Astros and the Cubs, the way they've kind of done it. So I guess that's the model for modern baseball.
Well, I guess the big story here on the south side would be who else is going to be next, right? I mean, there's going to be a little bit of a fire sale going on there the next 5 weeks.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, at some point you've gutted yourself. You're down to almost nothing, which is, can get there pretty quickly. The Cubs, I think it was 3 years ago. It's hard to even remember, but by the end of the year, they had guys playing that, you'd never heard of. I don't think they even had made it to AAA ball. And it was just kind of funny. Cubs fans are loyal as can be, so they came out to watch these guys, but they were not ever expected to make it to the big. So, I would guess that just about everybody is for sale on the White Sox. They're hoping for good things from Tim Anderson. Thought, okay, here's a young guy that's really going to develop in the infield. And, he's not having a great year this year. So you're kind of stuck with him. They gave him a fairly big contract. I don't know, but people come around and say, well, who's for sale? And the Sox would probably say anybody. Let's make.
Yeah, you want Melky Cabrera? Make me a deal, right? Make me an offer,
sure.
and I guess at that point, selling the guys off to save money would be just as good as getting prospects. I mean, you'd like to get some prospects, but part of the Red Sox deal was, you got 3 or 4 guys there that you feel like are going to be something, and you're sort of waiting on Moncada. And I know they don't want to start his clock too soon, but he's going to come into an environment that's, not going to be a winning environment. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah, I would agree with all that. It's I'm glad I'm not a baseball general manager. When things work out for teams, everybody sees why. When they don't work out for teams, it's because you didn't know that it wasn't going to work out. You thought, hey, this looks good. You know how it is coming out of spring training. At least 50% of the clubs think they got a shot at the postseason, or maybe 75%, maybe 100% too. Very few teams come out and say, "Hey, we're terrible," because they actually do see things in their team that are good. And I keep coming back to the Cubs. They have an advantage in this city that the White Sox don't have. That is that they have a fan base that will be there through thick or thin. They've got a lot more fans. People love to come out to Wrigley Field. They're idiots like, they're portrayed. People don't watch the score or anything like that just in fear. They're very knowledgeable fans. But it's also an enjoyable thing to do, to come out to Wrigley Field and maybe just visiting. And so they'll put up with the Cubs. The Cubs are terrible for, that 3 or 4 year stretch. I mean, they were really bad, losing about 100 games a year. And I was like, just wait. Theo Epstein, of course, from the Red Sox, and just wait, hold on a little bit longer. We'll be there. And sure enough, they were. The problem for the White Sox is you can't really do that with their fan base. They can dwindle down too if they keep losing to the dog days of September or whatever. And they got a ballpark you can come out and have your birthday party there anywhere you wanted. Have it at second base. That's the difference between the Cubs and the Sox in this city.
He is Rick Tellender. He has been in that city for the better part of 3 decades now, covering all things sports for the Chicago Sun-Times as a columnist there, and also a slam basketball evangelist. We'll get to your basketball side because he also writes books about basketball. But the Cubs are, really overshadow all of it, right? Like, I came out there last summer, Rick, for a couple of days to do Pearl Jam up at Wrigley, and I went down to see the White Sox play on that Sunday afternoon that I was there, and there was nobody there. And, of course, the statue of my cousin's out in center field, and my last name's on the wall, and I get the delicious elotes and the Italian sausage and draft beer and all the throwback jerseys and all that stuff. But, the Cubs, for owning the town and for you having been there through all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, the Sammy Sosa, all of that stuff, was there a part of you that was very, very heartened that they finally really did sort of scale that mountain and win? And I don't know that it's important that they win the World Series this year, despite all of these expectations. I mean, the city's really having a little bit of a hangover with how mediocre and how normal the Cubs have been this year, because no one saw this 500 thing coming.
Yeah, they're right at 500, and I think if you really got down to the root of it, a lot of fans and maybe even people in the clubhouse and in the front office, they can't help but be a little bit satisfied. It was 108 years. It was the longest streak of not winning a championship in any continuously functioning sports league in the whole world. 108 years without a championship. There's teams that haven't won yet in the major leagues, newer teams. And, I think there's 6 teams, maybe 7 teams that have never won a World Series, but, they're relatively new. So the Cubs, when they did win the World Series, it was like, okay, in my lifetime, in my children's lifetime, maybe in my parents' lifetime, my grandfather wasn't here to see it, my great-grandfather wasn't, so many of my friends died waiting to see it happen. It did happen. So, I mean, they don't have to do it again. I'm telling you. Yeah, I think in about 3 or 4 years, people will get restless again. But I don't see them winning it this year. I don't see them really being on par with, the Dodgers, maybe the Nationals, maybe, I don't know about the American League where the Yankees are for real, all that stuff. I haven't really checked it out what the postseason might be. But you're right. There is a satisfaction that has gone on with this championship that was unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. I never thought I'd see the Cubs win, and they did. And it's like, okay, I'm finished. That's it.
But it was unique in your city because you never thought you'd see the Blackhawks win, and they've won 3 times. I mean, the Bulls did nothing but win for a decade and a half. And even the White Sox got in under the wire a decade ago. And, you mentioned that period of time where, the White Sox are trying hard. Well, the Cubs weren't trying at all down the street. I mean, and even though the White Sox were winning, all it did was piss the Cubs fans off. It didn't make them White Sox fans, right?
Yeah. I keep going back to just thinking what I would do if I had my name on the outfield wall at any stadium anywhere. That's pretty cool.
Well, it is fun. Yeah.
But, about the championships, yes, as a sports writer, as a columnist here in the city, I have seen, and I wrote for Sports Illustrated, so I saw the Bears win in '85. I was down there in New Orleans. And then, of course, the Blackhawks, which we had almost given up on, but they changed everything after Bill Wirtz died. We got to see them win 3.
By the way, Rick, not to interrupt you, but that's the plan here in Baltimore with the Orioles, that at some point the Suns could actually run it back. I don't hold out any hope for that, but the Blackhawks are their own incredible story of perseverance, right? And an owner who was a complete jerk to everyone, and no one wanted to be around that franchise back when I was working up in Northbrook 15 years ago, and now they are the model franchise for the league.
Yeah, there's other model ones, too. I'd have to say the Penguins are pretty darn good right now. And Detroit was. It's hard to stay at the top. Very, very, very hard to stay at the top. I think it's easier to get to the top and much harder to stay there. The Blackhawks need to come back now. But you're right. Bill Wirtz was actually not an evil guy or anything like that. He was just way, way, way stuck in the past. I mean, he didn't even want to broadcast home games on TV, which is just, it's insane. So when he died, his son, Rocky, took over, and everything changed. Brought in John McDonough from the Cubs. So it did work. They did do the system right. They did win 3 championships. We hope they can get back. But, we got to see Michael Jordan lead the Bulls to those 6 championships. And honestly, with the Cubs, we'd like to see the Bears get back there. They seem a long ways off. But the White Sox in 2005, I got to tell you, I feel a little satisfied myself. I'm not hungry for any more. It'd be nice, but I don't have to have it.
Yeah, it's funny like that with the Ravens here. They've won twice in, 2 little sort of mini generations. And, the Orioles, no one ever expects the Orioles to win here. There's no pressure on the Orioles. Machado's hitting 220. If he were hitting 220 for the Cubs right now, they'd be frying his ass. And I think the White Sox kind of get off light, don't they? Maybe during the Ozzie Guillen era, there was a point where columnists took on the team or whatever. But the White Sox can lose all they want. No one's going to notice. All the pressure now is on the Cubs to some degree to not be a 500 team. And this has been kind of startling, right? Especially from the pitching standpoint, where all of these pitchers have all regressed at the same time. It's kind of weird.
Yes, this might be more the norm for teams, bad luck and injuries. Last year, the Cubs won, and I don't think people even fully appreciate this. It's hard to. They had every single player healthy at the end of the year. Every pitcher, even Kyle Schwarber, who was supposedly out for more than a year, was back and hitting like crazy for the playoffs. Who gets that? Every single starting pitcher, every relief pitcher, plus they had Chapman, brought him in. He was healthy to close, and, it's possible Joe Madden overplayed him. But everything worked for them last year, everything. And they still only won in the extra innings in the 7th game against Cleveland. So it is such a fragile line to be really good. And the Cubs right now are, quite frankly, they're exactly an average team. They've got an average record. Is that who they are now? Is that, is that going to be the norm? They're going to have to rebuild to get back up. Can they, is Kyle Schwarber a guy that's going to have to be sent to the American League and be a DH? These are all questions. Is Arrieta, they want to re-sign him for a gigantic deal. Kyle Hendricks is on the DL. That was the kind of stuff that didn't really happen last year. So, plus Chapman's gone. So they don't have him throwing 104 miles an hour. It's a very difficult thing. And staying up there, I think the Cubs are more likely, in my opinion, to be a good team, but not a great team again for a while. I really think they got to go through some. I don't know. This is up to Theo. This is if he wants to prove he's the boy genius that he is. I think as far as baseball goes, he's got another chance here.
Legendary sports columnist of the Chicago Sun-Times, Rick Tellender, joining us here. You can follow him out on Twitter at Rick Tellender. That's Telander. And, of course, covering all things Chicago as the Orioles are out on the south side there. I always prefer Comiskey, Rick. I'll be honest with you. I have no necessary Aparicio White Sox bloodline. I've never really rooted for the White Sox. Matter of fact, I rooted against them in '83 when Lamar Hoyt came in here and tried to beat us. So I never really had a soft spot, although I do like the throwback baby blue powders from the Bill Melton era.
I've seen you in your jersey, so I know. Everybody knows. We just moved to a new town, my wife and I here, called Highwood in Chicago. It's
Okay.
a little bit closer to, it's just a suburb. It's got a lot of restaurants and everything, and a real Italian heritage here. I just met a lady walking down the street yesterday. She was kind of hobbling along, so I chatted with her. I was watering the grass because it's hotter than hell here. And anyway, her last name was Giambi, and I said Giambi. And she said, yeah. As it turns out, she's relatives with Jason Giambi and Jeremy. So, I mean, I'm surrounded with people. I said, that'd be pretty cool to have the name Giambi. And she said, yeah, it was until all the steroid stuff came up.
I pull my ID out when I'm in the Midway airport, and whoever looks at it looks up at me and said, related? And that's the only airport that happens in. Doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. But in Chicago, Aparicio still, means something on the south side. But, for the Cubs, I've never been a Cubs hater, but there's something about Joe Madden, and I've spent some time around Joe when he was with Tampa and whatnot. That's got to be a dream for you to not only have this incredible story last year, but to have a guy like Joe Madden around, a guy like you that likes to tell stories. No one tells a story better than Joe Madden, right?
No, I love Joe. Listen, people will probably turn on him for all the things that he does, all of, his being so open, for doing, funny things, singing, bringing in mimes, having the magicians come, things like that. Guys wear pajamas. But I'm not going to turn on him. What he did was amazing, and I think he's the kind of guy that treats players the way they should be treated. Well, I know the way I would want to be treated. He's honest with them. If they're going to get sent down, he goes and tells them. Nobody hates Joe because I don't think they should hate Joe. And I happen to like him, and he will talk to anybody. One of the first questions I asked him at a press conference, it was, I said, oh, geez, this is kind of a stupid question. And he said, there are no stupid questions. I like stupid questions. And so I went on with my stupid question, and he answered. It was great. So as far as being a writer and a person who observes management and managers and people who govern others and coach them, I really like Joe Madden. I think he's a good guy, and more than a good guy, I think he's a good coach, and I think he's good for the game.
Next time I see Joe Madden, I'm going to tell him exactly what I'm telling you. I took phone calls for a living on sports radio and afternoons for 22 years, Rick. There are stupid questions. Believe me, there are stupid questions. I've heard stupid questions, Rick. Hey, man, always a pleasure to check in with you. Tell me about Slam basketball since you're an evangelist, and I know how much you love the game of basketball, and you've written books about it. I'm sure you've got something percolating for the next Rick Tellender book, right?
Yes, well, yeah, I am the basketball evangelist. When we started that about 6-7 years ago, Ben Osborne was the managing editor, and he said, Rick, what do you want to be called? Because I was going to be on the masthead. And I said, let's think here. And I didn't want to be minister of basketball, whatever. And so he said, how about evangelist? I said, yep, that's me. I'm an evangelist for the game. I love the NBA stuff that's going on. I've got a piece coming up. Let me think. What's it about? I wrote it a little while ago. It's about the draft coming up. And I think a bit about, would you take anybody from the Ball family if LeVar Ball, Dad LeVar Ball came along with?
Yeah, that act is already old, and I haven't even seen the kid draft. I don't even know what the kid looks like, to be honest with you. I only know what the old man looks like. I mean, we're in a frightening era of social media, aren't we, Rick?
Yes, we are, and half the people incriminate themselves on social media. Social media, we still haven't figured out. It enables us to communicate in a way that I think humans are not ready to do, or we just don't get it. I mean, we have, here in Chicago, people will FaceTime their crimes as they commit them. And you think, what exactly are you thinking? And all the, the shaming and the trolling and all this stuff, this is all kind of new. So we really don't know what to make of it all. You can try to stay off it, but you can't really. We don't want to go back. We're not going back. The first transmissions, probably smoke signals, and then, drones, and finally the Pony Express and telegraph and telephone. And, where do you want to stop? We don't want to stop with social media. We might say we stop right here, but we're going to keep going. Believe me, virtual reality is coming, and, some of the other things, driverless cars. I mean, this is not science fiction. This stuff is going to happen in certainly in your lifetime, Nestor, since you were just a young lad.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm just a young. Yeah, I was getting ready to call myself an old fart, quite frankly, Rick. And last thing for you, because I want to give you a little bit of a platform to talk about this, because I've only talked to one other person the last week, and I do feel remiss because I feel like for the next 6 months, I sit around here and talk to sports writers. I feel like even though I'm known for my radio work, I'm really a writer. I've written a book on Peter Angelos I'm releasing this summer out online called The Peter Principles, which I'm sure you would have a great laugh at with that. But Frank DeFord's passing last week as a Baltimorean, as a sports writer, and you talk about stopping the world. We're not going to stop the world, but for you and me and for our world, I still think of myself as a newspaper guy. I was trained by newspaper people, and John Stedman, and of course Frank DeFord, one of the colleagues many, many years ago, one of your colleagues as well. We lost him, and I know he's presented honors to you, and you've known him over the course of time. Just say a few words about Frank and about his life and his contribution, because that generation's getting lost now, right? Of that guy who was that thoughtful, and he really wasn't a sports writer. He was a writer who wrote about sports, right?
Yes. First of all, I'm just very saddened by Frank dying. In our business, as a writer, he was a great man. I mean, he was legendary. He was Mount Rushmore in our business. And I mean that seriously. He taught so many of us how to write, not that he taught us personally, but he showed us by us being able to read his writing. I've been around him a lot. I was able to induct him into the Ring Lardner Hall of Fame here in Chicago. That was 2 years ago, which was terrific. He was such a generous man as a writer. First of all, you're right. He wrote about sports, but what he got into were the things that were psychological. You want to know how things work? He would tell you. The game is there in front of you. You want to know what makes Bobby Knight or Bear Bryant tick? Who are they really? Well, Frank DeFord is going to show you. Billy Martin, some of these classic people that you thought you knew, and you don't know them until Frank DeFord writes about them. So he was magnificent at the long form, as they call it now. We used to call it magazine writing. At Sports Illustrated, we called it the bonus piece. In the back of the magazine, anywhere from 3 to 6,000, 7,000 words long, at the very longest, maybe. But usually 3,000 to 5,000 words. But he was also great at the column, which he did. He was great on NPR, the spoken word, and he was terrific on TV with Brian Gumbel, Real Sports. He did everything, and he did it so gracefully. The word that always comes to mind is elegant when you think of Frank. He had this little Clark Gable mustache and stuff, and he loved the color purple. He would wear suits and all that. But he was very confident, and he said, Rick, I'm kind of, I was a cocky kid. He knew he was a great writer. He already had a gig at Sports Illustrated when he was a senior at Princeton. He knew he was going to get that job. But so he didn't have to use that arrogance and cockiness to demean others in the business. It made him more generous because he wasn't worried about his own skills. And that's something you don't see very often. Most people are so protective and worried and concerned that all they want to see is somebody else go down the tubes, But Frank was the opposite. And when he started the National back in 1990 or 91, everybody wanted to write for him. Everybody. He went around, and he offered all kinds of crazy things because it was this guy, Emilio Escaraga. And we were on the yacht, Emilio's yacht down there off the tip of Manhattan.
Hold on. So the story starts with we were on the yacht.
Yes, it was not my yacht. Leaving up, but
not a lot of your stories begin with we were on the yacht.
This one, we were on the yacht. And here's one thing. Emilio, who owned, I think, Univision in Mexico, which is like owning NBC or, NCBS or whatever. And he said to us all that were there, and there were a bunch of writers, prospective writers and editors of the magazine. We had to take our shoes off when we got on the boat because the wood was so polished. So Frank, of course, is, 6'4", no problem for him. Some of the other guys are pretty short. I don't think they like taking their shoes off. But he said, I am rich. I am filthy rich. And we all kind of applauded. It was awesome. There's no way this guy can run out of money. But, of course, he did, or he got tired of, pounding it down a sinkhole for a year and a half. But Frank was in charge of all that. Frank had no idea how to publish, but he sure knew how to make people feel good about themselves, to write their best stuff. He knew talent. He knew all that stuff. He was truly a giant in this game. And you don't want to just be nostalgic about guys, because we're all going to die. Big deal. But he was still at the top of his game. He was 78. I'm not certain what he died of. He had lung issues. He had difficulty breathing, and I'm not sure if that contributed to it. I wanted to see him down in Key West. He had a lot of good stuff ahead of him. It's just a very sad time when I found that out, and I think about it all the time, Nestor.
Boy, Frank was so kind to me over the years, and he did a book signing and a reading up at the Enoch Pratt Free Library here, which he was a big believer in, and I had him on the show, I want to say maybe in the fall, and he did a signing at the Barnes & Noble here at the Harbor one day, and I walked over and just hung out with him for 2 hours just to listen to what he had to say, and of course he did the show with me after that, but the elegant word that you brought up, the one thing I would say about him, he was a writer with a real conscience, and it always led me to believe as a younger guy, and he was one of those guys that I looked up to, that if I asked him for advice, he would never give me bad advice,
Exactly,
just life advice. He knew
yeah.
he knew the right way to do things.
Another thing that people need to remember, the reason he was such a good writer is because he was very smart. And I think sometimes people don't think about that. They see writing as just some abstract skill that you have, like you can chop wood, or maybe you're very good at painting, and it just has to do with a certain part of your brain. But when you write like he does, you have to be not only smart, you have to be educated, and you have references to great books. You have allusions and similes and metaphors and all these things that make your writing come alive. He used all these techniques from fiction, which made his writing, just so amazing. He would put things in parentheses. He would say, and so that great man, you see, was just like the rest of us. And he'd use, you see, set aside with commas. And that's something you might see in a tale where you're sitting around the campfire. But he did those things in a way you thought, oh, man, that's awesome. He'd put things in italics. Hemingway did that in his books. Anyway, Frank was a brilliant man. And I think that needs to be remembered as one of the reasons why he was such a, incredibly humanistic too. But that's why his pieces that he wrote just sing with this vibrancy.
You keep doing good radio with me like this, Tellender. I'm going to call you more often, all right? So, hey, man, always a pleasure to check in with you. We're going to send everybody out to Rick Tellender, of course, Chicago Sun-Times, to follow your journey. Sorry I'm missing this one, but the next time you're down at Comiskey, go get some of those elotes and sprinkle on some cheese and some of the red cayenne pepper and some lime, and do that in my honor along with an Italian sausage, okay?
Well, I'll tell you, on a day like today, I'd go right into the rain room. I love that place, man. You just want to go in there and get soaked. You can do it and come out. It's 95 degrees here, but I don't know what it is in Baltimore. So I'll do that. But, yeah, I'll have all the peppers. I'll have everything. And I'll go down there and chisel my own name in the wall since you got yours.
You know what? We'll do that. I'd pay big bucks to sit and watch a White Sox game with you with some elotes and a cold beverage or two. So, maybe some deep dish pizza before it's all over with. I like it, Rick.
Okay.
I like it. I'll be in Chicago at some point. Next time Pearl Jam's playing Wrigley, wake me up, okay?
Okay, all right, Nestor.
Good to have you on. Rick Tellender, the man, the myth, the legend, from the Chicago Sun-Times, longtime columnist there. Give us a look at the White Sox as well as the Cubs and the life and times of the late and very great Frank DeFord. I'm going to grab all of my tapes of Frank DeFord for our next best of, which will be my anniversary week, the last week of July, when I do some best of around here. We'll get some Frank DeFord on the air to honor him, a great Baltimorean as well. You can find me out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. You can always email me, nasty@WNST.net. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.